Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm thrilled that you're here tonight, and I'm thrilled that you're chatting with each other. It's great. So I'm Nancy Hazard. I'm with Greening Greenfield, and I'm part of a group of people who are focusing on building native habitat everywhere to sustain life on Earth and address the climate and biodiversity crisis. I want to introduce to you the other members of our group who are here tonight. Dorothea Sotiris, you want to put your hand up? Great. And she's going to be working up here with sales and at the table after the event. And Elizabeth Erickson, where are you? Oh, great, thank you, right in the middle. And so she's helping everywhere. And then we have a couple of Greening Greenfield people. Why don't you raise your hand who are helping with registration and chairs and whatnot. So thank you all for being here. I also want to introduce Janet Masucci, who's our videographer par excellence, and thank her for filming this event so other people can hear Dave's talk. And after the event, if you want, you can review it. As you may know, Greening Greenfield's goal is to work towards sustainability in Greenfield and beyond, which is the sweet spot where environmental justice, economic vitality, and environmental equality are all addressed at the same time. Before I introduce our speaker, I want just a few housekeeping items. Please use the bathrooms downstairs. Go out where you came from and go down those stairs if you're able to do that. There is one accessible bathroom right here on this level here. So, our schedule for tonight. Dave is going to speak for about 45 minutes, and then we will have lots of time for Q&A. And after his talk, please stay and chat with Dave and each other and explore the many resources that Greening Greenfield has brought here. And we do have a number of things for sale, which I think some of you have already discovered. So, here we are. I am so thrilled that Dave Small is joining us this evening. Many of you may know him as the prime mover behind the Athol Bird and Nature Club. But before retiring 10 years ago, he had a long and fascinating career. And I just want to share a few highlights with you. As I was going over it, I was just fascinated. He's been born in Massachusetts, been here his whole life, and he has a long-term passion for exploring nature and for conserving land to support that. Following his passions, he worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for 35 years. Among other positions, he was the assistant regional director of the Quabbin Reservoir at DCR, which is the Department of Conservation and Recreation. He also worked for the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, finding and document state-listed rare and endangered species. And he organized a lot of biological inventories for various conservation organizations, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and local communities. He has a particular interest in early successional vegetation and habitat management. I thought that was fascinating. And he's worked with public and private land managers and utility companies throughout New England, helping them manage early successional plantings. Additionally, I discovered that he sat on and probably still does sit on a zillion boards, such as Mount Grace, Mass Audubon, just to name a few. Today, in addition to being the president of the Athol Bird and Nature Club, he is the director of the Millers River Environmental Center. We asked him to talk about his experience of transitioning his yard from a boring suburban lot, those are your words, Dave, dominated by lawn, to a rich habitat for our native wildlife, and a wonderful place to hang out with family and friends while enjoying all of the wildlife that is coming to his yard. I have an apology about, Dave has a million, this is the most gorgeous photograph. I just love this photograph, Dave, and you have a zillion other ones. And we neglected to have a clicker so that it's going to be a little bit slower than he probably
everybody. Was Janet, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a little exploration of my backyard. We moved into this house in 2007, and as Nancy indicated, it had all the good stuff. It had all the invasive plants you could want. It had good lawns and all this. So it was a little bit of a challenge. But I've been working with vegetation management for 40 years or so. So this is finally my own piece of the earth that I could do what I want with my wife's permission. But anyway, so I live in Athol, and we're really very fortunate to have a very rich environmental community. These are all the conservation and public and private lands on the Mount Grace had a lot to do with. And you can see my little green spot down in the middle of the thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that fits into the bigger picture as we go along. So I really, liked Greening Greenfield's philosophy about trying to do better with our little pieces of property. And there's lots of other groups that are doing a lot of this work. Diversity Society, Pollinator Pathways, National Wildlife Federation, a lot. So there's an awful lot that we're doing with that stuff around the country. So this was what I bought when I first got there. It was a very typical suburban kind of looking house, but we liked it. And so I didn't do much with the front. This is how it looks last September. This is from the Google Street View. But I did change some plantings and did a few things. But pretty much the front lawn is what it was. But it also, that's like how much lawn do you need? And it's enough. You should have only as much as you really need to have. So, so we were able to have dinner parties and stuff and whatnot on the lawn. And so I do have some traditional lawn areas, but you'll see as we go along that they are a little bit modified in some places. So this is the look at the backyard when we first moved there. This is one of those great Norway maples, which we cut down fairly quickly. And the seeds, the sprouts from this, at the edge of the woods, there's 1,000 little Norway maples that are trying to grow all the time. So it really is an invasive tree and one we don't want to propagate. So this is kind of like how the backyard looked. It was just a lawn. It was pretty wet in a lot of places. And as you're looking over to the right side, there was a row of 33, it was Scotch pine, some pitch pine, some red pine, a little bit of spruce, but it was by whole southern exposure. And as you kind of figured out that I really like a lot of sunlight for a lot of my butterflies and other things to come in. So it took a little bit of time this is the same row of trees. That's my neighbor's house across there. And it took a little bit of convincing to allow him to be okay with me cutting down these 33 conifer trees that separated our yards. There was a few beers that had to be expended to get that to happen. But we did, and he's a great neighbor. And so this is the beginning of my pond. This is a vernal pool. This was a wet spot in the bottom of the backyard. It's about 5 feet deep and 30 feet across. You notice there's a shelf area, and this is for the safety, so if somebody comes by the pool, they don't fall all the way in. It's a little bit of a safety thing. And on this side, on the near side, it's even, it's a little bit lower, and it is flooded most all the time, that first 3 or 4 feet. So this is when it's starting to mature in, and again, it just takes a bit of time, to get this to actually function as a unit. So here are a couple seasonal pictures. I mentioned it was a vernal pool, which means it doesn't hold water year round. But the trick is trying to get it hold water long enough for a species to actually mature and go through the whole process. So after a few years, we put it in a liner just in the bottom. It'll still dry up, but not for a lot longer than it would have without the liner. So it is just enough in the bottom to keep the polywogs and stuff going long enough for them to mature, hopefully. And you never know what you're going to find. This is a great egret that came floating into the pond one day, and oddly enough, I can see this pond from my desk at home where I work. So it's not much gets by, but you never know who's going to show up. You know, if you build it, they'll come. So this is kind of what it looks like at a normal summer day now. This is probably, 8 or 10 years into the process. All the cattails came in on their own. The duckweed came in on its own. But there's a few things that I added, some native plants, and really it's really vibrant. If you see that pile of rocks, I put that there for structure, so that the salamanders and whatever can actually find a place to get out of Dodge and hide between the cracks when the pond's full. So it just adds another layer of texture. So the wood frogs were probably the first to find it. There's some evenings now that in the summer that it's absolutely deafening between the wood frogs and the peepers, and the great tree frogs come in, and it's just really, it adds a whole new dimension to the yard. So this is my mosquito control group. So these are tadpoles from wood frogs, and if the video was playing, you could actually see copepods and all these other things that are in the water column. And the big point here is that it's a thriving ecosystem. There's all kinds of things living there and interacting. And this is a caddisfly, and again, this is I have to admit, I took these pictures on my desktop. This is a mason jar with this stuff in it that I grabbed out of the pond, and but it's really cool. All the different things. There's all kinds of diving beetles and stuff. You know what I mean? And it's great to work with the kids to see this stuff. Yeah. So this is my entertainment. I put this mason jar on my desk and sit there with close focusing binoculars and watch them move around. But so anyway, here's a newt larva. This is the red-spotted newt. That's actually you can see the gills, so we know it's a young'un, and it's it tells me that the pond is being successful in rearing these things. So I spent a lot of time with my grandkids, and I was going to make a few less slides, but I wasn't going to crop out these guys. So, but I use a minnow trap to test the pond every year to see what's going on. And these are spotted salamanders and red-spotted newts that were in the pond. Several weeks after the big migration that'll be happening any day now, when they go to their vernal pools, they get in there and they breed, and then the adults will linger for a little while longer, and that's when it's kind of fun to see what's going on. And I actually this fall, a couple of times now, have found very small spotted salamanders under boards and stuff in my yard. So we know that they're being successful, and that's the whole thing with a lot of this stuff. You want to make sure that you're not providing a sink for the population, but actually the population gets to thrive. Among all the things, this is a peck skipper. This is probably one of the more common butterflies in the yard. They're pretty small. This is not a milkweed. This is a band-winged meadowhawk. Again, they adopted my little vernal pool, and I get them every year now that are hanging out around the garden. This is a harlequin darner and my granddaughter. I find dragonflies to be a really great thing to work with kids because they're very durable. You get an adult dragonfly, they're pretty sturdy, and you can hold them and pass them around, and you put them on the kid's finger to let them go, and it has a very tactile experience. So I just recommend it highly. So you don't have to dig a pond to get water into your yard. And I use one of these Agway type buckets, and I have a heater in the wintertime in this. And you'll get a lot of bird species that you wouldn't get with just seed and other things. So, there's a whole new dimension. And during this last snowstorm, last few days, this water, the heated bird bath was probably as busy as as anything out there. You know, the birds are really into it. But I upped the ante the other 2 years ago now with a fountain that I run during the warm weather, and this really does attract birds. I've had flickers and all these other things coming into this, and there's a robin enjoying it. There's a scarlet tanager, that a female or winter male that's using the bird bath. There's some pine siskins that came in. And I keep this going right through to like after Thanksgiving until it really starts to freeze. And then I pull the pump out for the winter and put the heated bird bath on just on top of this. So, yep, the bluebirds, I have tons of bluebirds. And right now, this is my yard list from a few days ago. Up to 115 species observed right in my yard for birds. So all this stuff is working, in my mind. And I do monitor it all. These are, another thing that's good is to have patches of wet sand or mud, and things like the tiger swallowtails will congregate and look for minerals as they go through their process. And don't forget people. We need to feed ourselves too. And as I go around doing work in my yard, I graze on all the different berries that are available. So we talk a lot about pollinators, and I'm thinking about, and other people have been in my conversations with friends, we're really looking at the flower visiting community. We're looking at all the things that we attract to the yard that make the whole composite, because not all of them are pollinators. Some are predators, and some are parasites, and some are hyperparasites, and other things are all intertwined in here. So we're looking at, providing a habitat and a system that has all the components of it, and not just a sterile flower bed. So what do? You plant a garden. You want to include larval food plants. You want nesting sites, providing overwintering habitat. Remember not to overclean your garden. A messy garden is happier. And eliminate pesticide use, which is the number one thing that we all should be doing anyway. So this is a look at the backyard today, or last summer. I have a couple shots from an attic window, but you see the fenced-in area in the back is the people garden. We have a couple rows of blueberries, and the flowering habitat bed is right next to the patio. And this is looking just to the right of where we just were. And there's all these patches of overgrown habitat. Most of those were just things I chose not to mow. And then I let them go for 3 or 4 years, and then I go and knock them down or build a fire in the middle of them, or just push them back to the early successional stage and let them re-go. And I don't do a lot of extra planting in these, but in most of them. The ones in the front, there's a raspberry bed here in the very front, and then there's a pollinator garden that was kind of overgrowing. But again, the ones that are starting to go by, in the next year or so, I'll just take them out and start over with a new set. And the pond isn't right behind the crab apple tree. They're kind of invisible from this angle. So again, it's good to choose plants that flower at different times of the year. I plant in clumps when I'm going to be planting. Provide a variety of colors and shapes. We try to choose native plants whenever possible. I'm not a native plants, Gestapo or something. I have a few other things in my garden, but for the most part, they're the native plants, and there's reasons for that. They're better nectar producers and pollen producers, and they provide the habitat for the caterpillars, which is very important. So this again is my patio. It's just a lot of fun just to watch all the movement that's going on there any day. So some of the clumps of things we have some, it's a wild variety of sunflower on the top left. We have the orange milkweed on the top right, the regular milkweed here on the bottom left, and this is a Labrador tea. And if you can find it, I actually think the New Jersey tea is even a little bit better. But again, growing in clumps and providing a lot of color and a lot of structure. And blueberries. I have blueberries that I have kind of set out for people, but I have blueberry bushes all over my yard. You know, they're just in different places, and down near the pond there's a few, and you know, they're just there. So whenever I'm working out in the yard, I'm never too far from a good blueberry. This is one of my favorite bird attractants. This is winterberry, Ilex verticillata, and again, you need both male and female, but you only need one male to a dozen female plants, and I have a very big thicket of these things, and they just, the cedar waxwings and the robins and all that stuff go crazy over it. I've kind of more or less stopped putting out hummingbird feeders. I have enough plants and flowers in the yard that, you know, except for like, you know, very beginning of the season, I may have it out in April or whatever when they first come, but I don't really keep it up. I mean, I find that hummingbird feeders are a lot to keep up. You don't want the sugar water to go on you to cloud up and get moldy or anything. And there's so much in the yard that I get tons of hummingbird all summer long. So I just I'm lazy. I don't want to feed them. And you know, we really are looking at all the different bumblebees and stuff that are around, and many of these things are really not in good shape as far as populations go. And you know, we're really kind of most of the bumblebees in my yard are all the common bumblebee that, and we used to have a lot more species. So I'm concerned about the direction all these things are going, and I really think that it takes a lot of us to make sure that it happens and we save some of the habitat. So some of the things that were at the house when we bought it, this is a pipe vine, also called Dutchman's pipe. You can see the flower down the lower right. Looks like a Meerschaum pipe. Well, this apparently had been growing on the side of the house for years, but for the former owner. And when they decided it was really getting too much, they just threw it over the fence in the back. And this thing's about 70 feet tall, and it's already killed a couple of the trees that it was growing on. But it's a pretty cool plant. A little bit aggressive, but it does have some interesting things. This is the caterpillar of the pipe vine swallowtail, and I don't get them every year. That's a southern species that's moving up into Massachusetts. Our winters, I think, are still too cold for this, but they're there. This is the chrysalis, and that's the actual vine, the pipe vine. You can see it's not a small branch. But anyway, I haven't had it over winter yet, you know, and actually hatch out in the spring. And this is the adult, and these are coming up and laying the eggs and starting the process. But we haven't got them to come all the way through yet. I think climate change hasn't happened just enough yet. So here's another one. This is the spice bush, and one of the things I taught the grandkids was to look for caterpillars in spice bush. And there they are. As you unfold that leaf, this is where the caterpillars spend the day, and they're just the cutest things, you know. And there you go. This is almost the last instar, and you know, I bought this at this shrub at the native plant nursery out in Stockbridge, and I had the very first summer I had spice bush swallowtails, you know, laying eggs in it. So I don't think they came with the plant. And there's the adult. Now Buddleia, there'll be a few things on Buddleia. We don't recommend Buddleia anymore as an attractant. I have one or two plants. I think I only have one left. That was actually a wedding present, so I haven't really dug it up yet. But there's a lot of other things you can plant that are better than Buddleia. I don't find it to be invasive where we are. I think it's not cold enough to be, or it's too cold for it to really thrive. But we're kind of leaning away from that plant as a garden thing. But I got one left, and it's very active. There's tons of little guys out there. This is an American copper, and that's on asters. And, I get a dozen or two of these at a time, and and they like a lot of the stuff that the weeds that grow up in the yard also. That I used to call it sour grass, but there's another real name for it because I used to eat it. But anyway, good stuff. This is a silver spotted skipper on dogbane. Dogbane's a great attractant. It's a little bit hard to control. I make sure I have it in a place that I can mow around it because it does spread by both rhizomes and by seed pods. So, but it's good for wildlife, but you just have to control where it is. And there's a plethora of caterpillars. And this is where it's good to have those short people around with you because they're at the right level to see this stuff. And if you take the kids out and have them search, they can usually find some good stuff that you would totally miss. So, all right. So I mentioned before that it's not just about pollinators. There's a lot of other things happening. This is a soldier beetle. This is a locust borer beetle. Just handsome. This is a robber fly, and this is a bee mimic, a bumblebee mimic, and it's in the genus Laphria, and this was sitting in this is mountain raspberry, but he's a predator. He's waiting for something to come by and zip out and get it. So I talked about nesting habitats for a lot of these insects, and that's what I say about not having things too clean. If you have dead stems in your raspberries or some of your other plants, they actually have a hollow pith, and different wasps and other things will use those hollow piths to go ahead and lay their eggs. Often, like in the top, that's pollen that's stuffed into the hole. That when the larva hatches, it'll feed on that pollen and then work its way out of the tunnel. You can make some bee boxes, bee blocks. It's just a matter of cutting some holes. I found out that you can get paper straws that you can actually put in the holes so that you can clean them out each year and whatnot, which is a little bit more sanitary. And you can do a lot of things. This is actually a cuckoo wasp that's actually going to try to lay an egg in the outermost capsule of that bee nest. There's a closer up of them. But again, there's a whole series of things happening here. It's not just the pollinators, it's the predators of the pollinators and the predators of the predators. There's another way to do some of the bee block things. Just take a piece of cordwood and drill some holes in the end of it. You want them to be about 6 inches deep if you can. And just remember which ones you put holes in it so you don't use them in the fireplace. The early spring dandelions, I know people spend millions and millions of dollars of trying to get rid of these things, but they're really a great early plant for a lot of bees and other things. So they do pretty well in my yard. And we get a lot of day-flying moths. This is the snowberry clearwing. Again, this is monarda, I think, the white monarda. And, these are endless entertainment. And, when the kids were littler, it didn't take a whole lot to amuse them, or me either, But now the kids are 10, and they're learning a lot more about this stuff in school. And it's fun when they come home and, they called me up today and said, they asked me about some such and such, but we already knew that, So it's good stuff. These are the morph of the gray tree frog. These metamorphs are, about a half-inch long, and I've had times where I've had 50 or 60 of these out in the garden that came out of that pond, and they're just adorable. This is an elderberry borer beetle. I have several elderberries in the yard, another good plant for wildlife and for people. And this was once thought to be it was once listed as a rare species, but we found it a lot of places now, and it's not on the list anymore. But a beautiful, beautiful beetle. This is the swamp milkweed leaf beetle. Again, I have several different species of milkweed. The swamp milkweed's one of them, and common milkweed and the orange milkweed, but I get quite a few of these beetles. This is the Argiopa, the yellow garden spider. They have a beautiful web that's got a nice zigzag pattern in the middle of it. It's kind of disconcerting if you don't notice it and run into it, but other than that, it's just a beautiful addition to the whole fauna of the yard. And this is the Leonard skipper. This skipper doesn't hatch until like August to September, so it's one of the last butterflies of the season that's here natively. So I always kind of lament when I see these, because I know the season's grinding to a halt. So far I've had over 950 species of moth in my yard. I spend many nights going out, checking my wall. This is a permanent setup. I have it there all the time. And there's lots of other things. You see a Luna moth in the middle. There's some fish flies and other things out there. There's a few other things I'm sure we're going to see. Yeah, there's a spring peeper up for the free lunch program. And, I love kind of misty, warm nights. So they're really great with no moon. And that's when we seem to get the most activity. I gave this talk or a similar talk to the Garlic and Arts Festival, and this is just a slide that I had gotten the night before the Garlic and Arts, which is at the end of September, early October. And these are just some things that happen to be there that week, And look at these. This is some moths from July. And, the diversity and the shapes and the colors are just amazing. And this could be anywhere in New England. This isn't just my yard. They're all over. And there's a few more. I like these underwing moths. The one in the middle with some of the underwing moths have red and black stripes and are pretty cool looking. But just the diversity and stuff it draws me out every night. So far, I've got 720 confirmed species of moth on iNaturalist, and I started iNaturalist a little late, so I've only been doing it since 2013, and now I say every winter, I'm going to take those moths I haven't added and go ahead and put those pictures in, and I think winter's almost over, and I didn't do it this year, but it's pretty good to have, I have a potential for 805 species that I've recorded here. So how do I get to have that number of moths? Well, you invite your friends. This is the annual moth ball. Last year we had about 70 people come, and they basically we set up extra lights and nets and sugar bait and everything, and we just roam around the yard. We take pictures and tell stories. And it's just a real fun time. And there's lots of wonderful naturalists in Massachusetts and in the area that come and help each other identify things. So it's really great. And, there's plenty to eat, and which makes the party go. But this is my back deck area. And there's all kinds of things happening in all these flower beds at the same time, not just at the lights. So here we are. And I know you're going to hear from Dan Jaffe and others, and there are grass alternatives. This is a part of my lawn. When I go back, I plow snow a lot with my own tractor, and I make a lot of mistakes, and so I have to go in and reseed. And I've been adding a lot of clover in, and it actually is very durable. The different bumblebees and stuff love it. So it really is. I don't say it's perfect for everywhere, but there's lots of other things that are available nowadays for lawn alternative covers that allow you to still use your lawn, but not deplete your we don't use fertilizers, we don't use any of that stuff, we don't water the lawn, and I find that these clovers and stuff are much more drought resilient than all these bluegrasses and fescues that they want to sell you. So anyway, that's that. And if you are going to mow, you might as well have a really sleek electric lawnmower, so, and someone to operate it. But anyway, so I got this last year. This is so great because I can mow my trails around in the yard, and it's so quiet. I can sit there and I usually have my camera with me, and I sit there and take pictures of the bees and stuff, and they aren't bothered at all by it, which is just great. So here we are back again, and the whole thought about this and having all you people with us is that, I have 1 acre, and I really would like to see this happening a lot of places. And what if there were all those other Dave yards around the neighborhood? And if we could actually bridge the gap between the protected lands that we do a lot of work with, but if we each took our own little 1/4 acre, 1/2 acre, and made it just a little better, I think it would be a better world. And again, there's lots of advice. I really appreciate Greening Greenfield for the invitation and for the guidance. Get everybody thinking about this in the long run. And this is one of my favorites. This is the Himmelmann's plume moth on dogbane. You know how big a dogbane blossom is. It's not very big. And it's just a gorgeous animal. And these are some of the things that you can attract to your own yard. And that's that. And you can find me on the web at atholbirdclub.org and dave@atholbirdclub.org if you want to email. And for sure, there's a pamphlet on the table over here. And I don't think we did too bad for time. So I'll be happy to.
It looks like shiner crab. Did you catch
Yes.
those in a shiner crab?
Yeah, exactly what it is. Yeah, and it's my own yard, so I don't need a permit. But it's just an unbaited shiner crab,
That's so cool.
and for some reason it works really well.
Yeah, they're hard to catch, like in that quantity.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just one, I only had the one trap, and I did it 2 different days in a row because the grandkids were spending the weekend, so just test out what was going on. But that's a good way to survey for salamanders. Yeah.
If you were to put say a shallow tub on the ground, would you dig a hole and lower it, get it closer to the ground, or does that matter?
I would make it, yeah, if you want animals to be using it, you want it flush with the ground surface, And I know lots of people, have these, little ponds in their yards. I mean, some of them are better than others. Having a soil surface is probably better for a lot of things. Certainly it's more natural. And like a lot of stuff like to burrow into the soil, dragonfly larvae and stuff are actually down into that muck at the bottom. That's where they're hanging out, so they don't get eaten. Okay. All right, Tom.
Well, we're pure sand, without using a tub. Could
Yeah.
we lay clay down there to stop infiltration?
Yeah, I mean, you can use a liner and then sand on top of the liner too.
Okay.
So you wind up with that surface. Plastic doesn't really drill them. Yes.
What's the square footage of your pond?
Yeah, I should actually have a figure for that, and I don't.
Well,
It's about 30 feet by 20.
okay.
I mean, it's a relatively good sized pond. And the thing was, it was a spot in the lawn that was always wet. And so even today, when the pond is totally full, it just oozes out over the lawn into the woods, which is great, but when we dug that, there was no engineers involved in any of this. I just want you to know that. I had a friend with a backhoe, and that was all it took. And the whole thing just worked out beautifully. And it is a little deeper than I would think. But, we got down in there, and we did it like in late April, early May. And there was so much water coming in from the groundwater. I was looking for trout. There was water coming up. So, but it's really effective. And, you know, like I say, I've had wood ducks, I've got mallards that come through, you know, we got gray tree frogs and peepers and toads and, you know, salamanders and stuff, you know what I mean? So, there's no fish in the pond on purpose. Again, if you put fish in a pond, it's detrimental to all the salamanders and frogs that you're trying to go, so I'm trying to keep it unfished, you know, which is another good thing. And it doesn't always dry out. This year it dried out like very early. You know, and that was like the whole thing about trying to keep it wet as long as you can in the summer, so that all this stuff has a chance to grow up. Yes.
Do you ever have to thin out the greenery that's in that pond? They start to take over the pond?
Yes, I have a helper that comes by once in a while, and I send him in. So, but yeah, no, the cattails, because of the liner, they tend not to stand up. You know, the roots don't go deep enough where the liner is, so they tend to flop over. You know, so I do pull out some of those, and I have a Leopold bench. You know what those are? That's a really great little bench that you can build it out of two by 8s. But anyway, I have that right at the edge of the pond, and I keep a view shed from my bench. Watch the stuff. So I do manipulate it. I'm a manipulator. I mess with this property all the time. Yeah.
When you put in your clover, did you just overseed the grass?
Yep. Yeah. I didn't do anything particularly. You know,
When did you do that? In the spring or fall?
when I got around to it.
When you got?
Yeah. No, I just spread some, some bare spots and stuff. I just walk around and, take a handful of, it's not like, not any kind of rocket science behind it. Yes.
How do you keep the water in the pond from getting stagnant? Always be moving?
Well, two things. Ordinarily in a vernal pool, it gets water replenished from the groundwater. Right? So the other thing is that I actually wound up with a lot of duckweed that really kind of choked out the pond. So I have an aerator that I run, and it just blows air into the bottom of the pond, and actually it helps to keep the duckweed from taking over the whole pond. And it does seem that all the salamanders and stuff don't mind it, but it's just air. It's just an air pump that goes into a stone in the bottom, and it keeps it open all winter too. So I wind up with a few things, drinking out of it all winter. Okay. Yeah.
Do you struggle with Japanese knotweed or bittersweet or anything?
Yeah, that big line of trees that I had cut down, those 30 trees, I was going to be a hero and go out and start cutting them, and the first 2 trees I cut down didn't fall, and then I cut like 2 feet off the bottom, and the tree's just hanging there in midair, and I'm thinking, the bittersweet's winning, So really, until you can get it so you can actually mow bittersweet, in my mind, it's really difficult to control. You really have to be able to get at it, and I mowed it for quite a while, a couple, 3 years, and pretty much beat it back, after I got rid of as much as I could. But it pops up all over, and it's just a matter of, every time you're out around the yard, you see a little one coming up, you just pull it up as much as you can, get all the roots you can out of it, because a little tiny piece of root will survive, so it's tough. The Norway maples are still a problem, I still find them in the edge of the woods, it's a constant battle, but, I look at it, if it's your acre or whatever, you're out there and you can be actually doing this, a land trust or somebody or the state, whatever, has thousands of acres to try to deal with, and they can't put that attention to it. It's just the scale is just too much to deal with. So if you do it on your little property, you can probably have a lot better success at kind of keeping your little zone going than you can if you have a lot of property. Yes?
how do you power the aerator and your winter fountain?
Electricity.
Is it coming, do you have solar or?
I do have solar on my barn, yeah. And the aerator, I won't tell the building inspector how I got that power down there. But the fountain, I did it with an electrician. I have a nice little stand right nearby that I actually use for the pump, you know, the fountain in the summer and the heater in the winter on the same place. Yes?
What is the water source for your small pond and bird bath? And do you have to clean it?
All right, so the pond is strictly groundwater.
Yes.
All right, and that, you know, like I say, as long as the water table is up, I have water. On the fountain, it's a recirculating pump, and there's a 12-gallon base to the fountain, and that's what recirculates. And I have to, you know, I probably clean it out 2 or 3 times a summer, you know, and just replace it. And I add water to it if we don't get a lot of rain, you know, because it'll evaporate, you know, birds drink it, you know, but you know, so I have a hose nearby that I can hose off any of the, you know, bird dew that's on the edge of the fountain to keep it clean. But just a regular garden hose. Kind of.
Do you feel like you have to sanitize it or burn
No,
it?
I think the moving water does a lot to help with that. You know what I mean, it's circulating all the time.
Yeah.
You know. Yes.
Would you ever want to get honeybees?
Those are agricultural things. You know. And we have this conversation a lot because, you know, I'm much more interested in native wildlife. I find that honeybees are actually, you know, the cows of the agricultural plant world, you know, and they're in competition with some of our native bees. So I'm really more focused on attracting and providing habitat for a variety of our native species and trying not to, you know, if people want to do honeybees, that's fine. I don't care. I like honey. But, you know, it's not my focus. Yes?
I have a question about, excuse me, the clover on your lawn.
Yeah?
We used to have a lot of clover, and once in a while somebody would step on a bee,
Yeah?
walking barefoot across the lawn. So I was kind of glad to see the clover gone, but now I want some again, and I'm just wondering, is this an issue that you have grandkids?
Yeah. And it depends on how you mow it. You know, like if we're gonna be doing something outside in the heavy clover, I might mow it a little lower that day. You know what I mean? And just take some of the flowers off, and they'll reflower in a day or two. So I mean, it's not I haven't had a big issue with it, but I know my grandkids don't want to get stung. They've mentioned it.
Okay.
All right.
So,
Again, thank everybody for your time.
thank you. Well, thank you, Dave, for sharing this, how you transformed your yard. It's really quite amazing. And your photographs are so beautiful, just really, and photographs of your grandkids and stuff. So let's just give Dave one more round of applause. Okay, so I just have a few things to say, sort of looking into the future. Greening Greenfield has one more talk in our Transforming Our Lawns series, and that's going to be held on the 13th of April. And it's actually going to be a Zoom talk because the speakers just had a baby. So the topic is very similar to what we had tonight, but the approach about their backyard is completely different. So I think you'll enjoy it. It's offered by the naturalists Charlie Eisman and Julia Blythe. And their talk is called Turning a Barren Lawn into a Thriving Habitat. So just what we heard tonight. Charlie is also an entomologist, and he's author of a book on leaf miners. The book is about this thick. So whoever knew there were that many leaf miners. So I hope you'll look for that email that will announce that.
What time on the 13th?
It's going to be 6:30.
Here?
No, it's a Zoom thing, so you may stay home. That same evening, Greening Greenfield is going to be unveiling a new resource that Elizabeth Erickson has been working on, along with one of the other of our group who's not here tonight, but Mary Westervelt, which showcases the pollinator gardens in Greenfield. So, and it's called Park by Park and Yard by Yard, Building a Pollinator Corridor in Greenfield. And I think you'll really enjoy that when it's pretty much ready for prime time. In addition to our next talk and the unveiling, Greening Greenfield is going to be doing a lot of plantings this spring, summer, and fall. The City Hall, John Zahn Community Center, near the new skate park, and out at Just Roots. And perhaps there's other things may bubble up for us to do that as well. So please let us know of your interest in working on that kind of project with us. And we left an evaluation form on your chairs, which hopefully you've all noticed, and please fill that in and let us know, as I say, and there'll be at the registration desk, you can drop them off on your way out. So also, before you leave, please check out, if you haven't already had the opportunity of checking out Greening Greenfield's table here, we have a lot of resources. There's a whole lot of, the books are all sort of our favorite books that we've brought in to share with you. So hope you will enjoy that. We also have a list of where to buy native plants locally, and a piece that Dorothea Soteris wrote called Sink Carbon in Your Garden, that explains how gardening also addresses the climate crisis. And we also have some things to buy. One book, which I personally have been really inspired by, that we're selling tonight, that actually Pam Kelly brought here to sell, is called A Mini Forest Revolution, Using the Miyawaki Method to Rapidly Rewild the World. So while much of Franklin County, of course, is completely forested, so why is this something we might want to do? But it's not so true of Greenfield and some of the other urban or larger towns in Franklin County. So one of the things when I was reading that book is like, okay, so in Greenfield, where would we put such a thing? Where would we want to see that? There's also some signs called Planting for Pollinators, which you can purchase and put on a tree or get a stake and put it in your garden and help us spread the word. And we'd love to see these signs all over Greenfield. And we also have really interesting, beautiful deck of cards. It's to help you plan pollinator gardens. So each card is a different different plant species. So you can take them out and just kind of spread them out on a table and figure out what you want to do. So thank you again for coming, and Dave, you're hanging around for a little while, chat, and so I hope see you at our next Zoom talk. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.